Hey, what's up, guys? You're listening to the It Takes a Village podcast. I'm Ashley, your host. This is where the struggles are real, the callings are heavy, the kids are sticky. We come together because it takes a village, and this is your tribe. Hey, everybody. I'm super excited for you to be listening to the podcast today. And today I have Brittney Smart on the show with me. She is an author of The 5-Minute Time In and several other Kindle books I've also noticed on Amazon. And most importantly, like what takes the crown is that you're a mom of 5. So welcome, Brittney, to the show. Thank you for being on.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah. So I've noticed, and this is totally off the hat and random, but as a new mom of 3 now, I feel like once you hit 3, I can just like add on more kids and it not be like this huge transition to where I'm like, why didn't I do this sooner? Like, let's just keep having them. It's no big deal.
Oh my goodness.
But maybe not.
Oh, well, congratulations, by the way, on your baby. That's awesome. Yes and no. I feel like you kind of learn to juggle in ways that you never knew were possible with each kid. But oh my goodness, they still require so much of you that I don't necessarily think that it's true that 3 is the same as 14 kids.
Right.
I don't know how that could be humanly possible. But yes, 3 for me. 3 was the hardest adjustment when I had my 3rd child. That was a tricky navigation time, and then once you kind of get your feet under you and get going, then you can be flexible. So
yeah, I think mine is sort of cheating because I have a newborn, but then my other 2 are actually older, so they're really independent, and it's not the same as having like a bunch of little ones. But
no, yeah, that makes a huge difference.
But so while we're on this topic, and why I bring that up is because as a mom of 5, and the reason that you wrote this book, The 5-Minute Time In, is because you were kind of feeling that struggle of like, I am completely outnumbered, or at least this is kind of what I gathered from your book and reading about it, and was kind of being in this place of like overwhelm and trying to figure out how to be very present when also you're very depleted because you're like everybody needs you and there's not enough of you to go around.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. So my kids, like you say, I have 5 kids. My oldest is a boy, and then I have 4 girls after that, and they're spread about 11 years apart, and so from oldest to youngest. And I didn't quite realize at the time when I was pregnant with my 5th. It was kind of a hard pregnancy, and I had to modify my lifestyle, do some bed rest and everything. And like you said, it was a really challenging time for me. I just kind of not completely, but I shut down. I just gradually disengaged from my children. And I don't know, looking back, there probably were a variety of factors in that. It wasn't something that I did intentionally, but it was like I was feeling overwhelmed just from having 4 other young-ish children, and having this pregnancy. And then I would kind of get in the habit of lying on the couch or in my bed or whatever, because I needed to be kind of horizontal and taking it easy. And so I feel like I disengaged that way, and my life just kind of became easier without my other children around. And then when I had my baby, I just kind of kept that up, and looking back, it just makes me sad how isolated I was, how disengaged I was, how separate from my kids' lives I was, and I just kind of lost the spark of being a mom, which is unfortunate at that critical time when your kids are young and they're so impressionable and there's so much joy to be had with them, I just lost that. Just didn't have it.
Yeah, but I think that so many moms can relate to that though, because and and what I love about you bringing it up and writing a book about it is that so many moms feel that way because we do, like, we it's overwhelming, and sometimes that's just an easier way to cope, and and it's like there's guilt tied to that and shame tied to that, and we feel guilty for feeling it, and then we feel
Yeah.
guilty for feeling that, like
Yeah. Yeah.
it just like consumes us, and then it feels like we're in this place that we can't crawl out of. So how did you realize, like, how were you able to like look from the outside in and see what was going on, and then like that need to want to change it?
Yeah. Okay. So for me, and I just like for this is a tricky thing because for me, everyone is different. I have so many mom friends who they also disengage kind of from their children's lives, but it's for different reasons. Like they start a new business or
Yeah.
they are on a fitness journey and it's very important, for them to do that. And so there's so many different reasons for disengagement, and so not everyone's story obviously is going to look the same, but for me, ha- mine was more of an emotional disengagement. Like I just was depleted. I just had, zero fuel level in my tank.
Right.
And I was, but even with that, I still, when you're a mom, when you're a parent, you still have to be present to some degree
Yeah.
to, see to the base needs of your children. They're not going to go hungry. They still need rides places. So I would describe it as more of like kind of apathetic autopilot. I
Yeah.
just, going through the motions.
Yeah.
And,
I can
and
see
that's
that.
kind of where I was. And something about me, I'm a religious person, and I found myself in the Bible one day, in First Corinthians, and I found a verse in there that talked about that just really hit me hard. It talked about if you have you could be a sounding brass or tinkling silver, and if you have not charity, you are nothing. And that struck me so hard because I felt like I was on being that sounding brass. Like I was tons of noise, as a mom, like clean your room, go away, take care of it yourself, that kind of just really negative. Um, I felt like I was just that brass with zero substance, with zero love behind it. So I was
Mm.
missing the charity. So that kind of struck me like I need to have love. I'm missing charity. I'm missing love for my kids. And how do I get that back? And so after some thought, I was kind of stumped, like, oh, well, that's easy to say, like, oh, yeah, you need to love your kids, which I
Right.
love. I mean, they
Of
were not
course,
like,
right.
yeah, they were not in harm, but I wasn't liking them. And so I thought, how do people like learn to like or love other people? Like going back to the basics, how does that work? And I just finally realized it's time and it's getting to know someone and then, liking them with whatever it is that you find in them. And so I thought, okay, I need to get to know my kids again, like starting a new relationship all over. And I didn't have a lot of time as moms know, we're busy,
Right.
and a lot of it is necessary busyness. Sometimes, when we can evaluate, sometimes maybe it's not necessary busyness, but there is a baseline of our time is filled taking care of these children. So I thought, okay, I need to get to know them. How is that even going to happen? Like, first of all, I'm disengaged. Like I'm having a hard time caring. Second of all, it requires time to get to know someone. So I thought, okay, here's the plan. I can take 5 minutes every day. And for me, it happened to be right before they went to bed. Every night at bedtime, I will take 5 minutes and spend that with each of my individual children and just hang with them, just fully focus on them. for those minutes, and I'm going to write down whatever happens, and I'm going to commit to doing that for 4 weeks. And so that's what I did.
So, what would a typical routine look like? Because I know that there's a lot of moms listening that are thinking, okay, like 5 minutes sounds easy to do, but then when you divide it between two, three, four, in your case, five children, like how do you get that done with dinner? And how did you approach your kids with like, this is something I'm going to do? And did you even talk to them about it, or was it something you just kind of started doing?
Yeah. So, okay. So, that's a good question. And in the book, I talk about because every family is so different.
Mm-hmm.
You'll definitely need to modify what works for you. Like if you have 10 kids, an hour each night at bedtime, that's just
Yeah.
not really practical, and that will go against everything. But you don't have to do it right before bedtime. I chose to do that because that's when it worked for my family. But the point of it is like the 5 minute, like that is a concrete and a small amount of time that can have a concrete difference in your relationship and in your connection. But so I chose to, because I am a full-time mom, I do freelance work from my home, but I don't work outside of my home. I was able to spend time with my two younger children. So when I implemented the time in, I had a 3-month-old and a 3-year-old. And so I counted time in with them home. I did not do right before bed with them, but my
Gotcha.
3 older children, I did. They were, at the time, I think 7, 9, and 11. And so they kind of had staggered bedtimes-ish a little bit. So I would just start with the younger one, with my daughter, my 7-year-old. And I did not like make an announcement that I would be doing this.
Right.
We didn't have like a family meeting or anything. In fact, I didn't even tell my husband. Once I decided, like, I need to do this time in thing, there's a part, like the prologue of my book describes that first conversation where I climb up into the top bunk with my 7-year-old, and I just kind of sit there, and she's like reading her book, right before bed, and she looks at me and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I just wanted to hang out with you for a few minutes and just kind of see how you're doing." And she like tosses her book aside. She's like, "Oh," and she kind of starts laughing. She's like, "Okay," and then she kind of like starts doing this nervous giggle, like, "Okay, this is weird. What do we talk about?"
Right.
And I'm like, "Well, whatever you want." And she's like, "Okay," and kind of stuttering, like her world has just been rocked because all of a sudden her, mom, who I haven't been paying much attention to my kids. I've been in my little cocoon of, emotional struggle. All of a sudden I'm just there on her bed, and she's like, "I seriously don't even know what to talk, to you about. Yeah. Like, I don't even know." And so we just like it really is kind of like a weird first date experience. I'm like, "What's your favorite color? What's your favorite food?" I mean, stuff that probably, I don't know, probably, I shouldn't use the word probably, but I would imagine, and I did imagine at the time, most moms know that stuff about their kids. But I was like, I had to start from scratch, like getting to know this person. So anyway, that's how I started it out. Just jumped in 2 feet.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that that reminds me of when my husband and I first started making date night a priority of like we always tell our friends like how impactful it is on us to have that date night and how awkward it was when we first started, but that's exactly what it is. It's just like that willingness to be awkward, and then eventually you start to get it, it's not awkward anymore, and you get used to it and you find things to talk about. But even if you're a mom who's not what do you call it? Like, you're not checked out emotionally, or you don't feel like you're on autopilot. As we get busier and as our kids get older, I feel like there's always a positive to stopping and
For
talking.
sure.
And then there's things that you hear that they don't normally, like when you're running around and just running errands, that they're not like, "Hey mom, like today at school, this kid, or my best friend isn't talking to me anymore." Like there's things that they don't tell you until you stop and
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's such a good point. I mean, I feel like, and even now, I, um, I wrote the book 4 years ago, and it took me a long time to work up the guts to publish it. I just felt too vulnerable, too exposed, too close to my emotional pain,
Mm-hmm.
in those years. And then finally, I just realized, this, I don't know, this could be helpful to someone else who was feeling the same way that I was feeling. So I just will share my story and take that. But um, yeah, at the time, it just was something that was uh, so necessary,
Yeah.
so important, to start at the beginning. And what you said was so true. Like when you embrace the awkward pauses at the beginning, and maybe not embrace them, but don't worry about them so
Yeah.
much, recognize that it's part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was amazed at how quickly my kids began to, first of all, like expect time in, like that became part of their bedtime routine,
Uh,
which is so, they embraced it much quicker than I did, sadly. Like, by day 3, I was like, oh my gosh, can I just skip tonight? Like, it took
yeah.
me a little while to be like, I was just so used to coasting through my disengaged life,
Yeah.
to break free of that. But yeah, they were excited. And then what was so interesting for me is after, I would say, 2 or 3 weeks, like we could be comfortably quiet at
Mm.
times, or they would save up things to tell me, not throughout the day, but like in time in. Like that was a really special kind of magical time, because they knew like they would have my full attention that night. And so, which was, I thought, was the first time that happened where they're like, I've been wanting to tell you this, like all day, and they tell me a thing or whatever. That just really warmed me, like, oh, this is working. They want to connect with me, and
Yeah.
we're such a,
They love me. They really do
they
love
love
me.
me. I know I don't necessarily deserve it lately, but we're working on it, and they love me. They need a mama.
Yeah.
Oh,
Having this conversation makes me think about my daughter last night because I think that one of her love languages is quality time. And just knowing that now, and I'm listening to you talking, and she came in last night and she always wants, like, she's 9 and she wants us to snuggle, but she kind of like lollygags through like the bedtime routine. And so by the time we're done with it, like my husband and I are just like done and we're ready to sit down and like just have us time. And I'm ready to like, and I also have, newborn. So I'm like feeding him and, she'll come and say like, Mom, I want snuggles. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
yeah.
Um,
Oh,
but it makes me think of this, like how it's so easy for us to just be like, it's one more thing. I'm done for the day. Like you're exhausted, rightfully so. We're mentally, emotionally, we're like done.
yeah.
But then I feel like now that I'm thinking about it, it's probably that time that she's looking forward to, of like, it can be just me and Mom. Like I don't have to share her with my brothers, and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
even if we're not talking, she's getting that connection and that time, that one-on-one time that I'm probably going to regret not taking when she's a teenager and it backfires on me right now. So,
Well, yeah, I mean, who even knows? But that's the thing that I love about this, is that it really sets up a relationship, establishes a relationship that, I mean, taking 5 minutes a day now, can you imagine, like, visualize you and your child in 5 years and in 10 years, and what your relationship can look like if you are connecting
mm-hmm.
every single day, like in a meaningful way, not just like, here's your dinner, good luck,
Right.
like
Good luck.
whatever, here's your
Yeah.
lunch, don't be late to the bus, or what, I don't know, whatever. But if you're, and some days the connection is not that significant.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the book, there were some days where my daughter, I would go down to her room and she'd be like doing a crossword puzzle in her room and
Mm-hmm.
didn't even really want to talk with me. And so like there's days like that where it's like, oh, this is a waste of everyone's time.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that when you look at it cumulatively and on a trajectory of like, this is so awesome for our relationship.
Yeah.
My son, my son's the oldest, and he was 11 at this time. He, after about a week or two, he started really just opening up. And there was one night I remember I was so exhausted. It had been a crazy day, and I almost didn't like give him 5 minutes because I kind of popped into his room, and I'm like, tried to small talk, and then I'm kind of secretly checking my watch, like, okay,
Yeah.
3 more minutes. I committed to 5, but isn't 2 good enough? I checked in. And then just as I was about to leave, I did stay for the whole time, for the whole 5 minutes. Just as I was about to leave, he opens up about this. You can read about it in the book, but just this thing that he has been struggling with internally that I had no idea. And so we ended up spending like 25 minutes that night. And the fact that he felt like he could trust me with that information, I think he wouldn't have done it a week or two before we had started Time In. Like it took some time for him to be like, oh, she's serious. Like she's serious. She really does care.
Yeah.
She really will hear me. And then my husband and I were able to talk about that and able to, get on the same team parenting him in that struggle, my son. And so there's moments like that it's like, this is totally worth it.
Yeah.
And there are moments when it's like, okay, this isn't doing anything. It's, I'm a face in their room right now. Whatever, they don't care.
Yeah.
But overall, like, I just think it's so important. It's critical.
Yeah. I mean, even I feel that way sometimes where I don't necessarily want to engage with somebody, but I enjoy having another person in the room, which, and I don't know what it is about that. Like, I don't need you to talk to me. I don't need you to, but just not being by myself, it makes it better somehow. But
totally. Yeah. Well, and probably that person who you are comfortable with when you're in those moments, like that's someone you trust, and that you're not going to get the same sort of emotional support of having someone just physically nearby with a stranger as you would like, a trusted other person that's a family member and something. And I think for me, like I had to start clear at the beginning to even get that, like, I'm comfortable now that my mom is here in the room, like it didn't just pop out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it takes a history of having that connection.
So I have 2 questions for you. I'm thinking of since we started talking, and one is, or actually I'll tell you both of them. But I want to know how your husband was during this process of you being kind of in the checked out state of mind, or like, did he notice that you were on autopilot, and like, how did that affect you guys? And then my second question being, like, once you started this process, like, we know the benefits relationally between you and your kids, but I want to know, like, if it changed you or how it impacted your personal, mental, and emotional, and like your well-being.
Yeah. Okay.
Those were 2 very deep, very
Yeah. Okay. Let me gather my thoughts. So, when I was going through this time, I call it the dark ages. So I am very, very blessed. My husband is a fantastic man. He's an awesome father. He's a supportive husband. I love him. We have a good relationship. And he did notice that I was struggling at this time. Unfortunately, like I was in such a weird place internally that even his external support and kindness and encouragement, I mean, it was nice, but I didn't internalize hardly any of it. Like it was nice in the moment, but it didn't change anything for me emotionally. Like, because in my head, I'm like, I'm a horrible person. I don't, moms aren't supposed to feel this way. So thank you for telling me that I'm a good mom. And thank you for, being kind and helping with kids. And like, he was doing all the things he was doing. I just wasn't accepting. You know what I mean? I don't
Yeah.
know if it makes sense.
No, yeah, totally. I think that because we're still hugely impacted by comparison, and we assume that other moms couldn't possibly be, feeling these feelings and oh my gosh, what a horrible mom I am when this
Yeah,
mom over
yeah.
here. So yeah, I could totally see how that would.
So yeah, so he did notice, and he did what he could. But then, like, as I started the time in, I didn't actually even tell him what I was doing. It was about a week into it, I think, if I remember right, when he was kind of like, where where are you
Like,
going
what are
every
you
night?
doing? Yeah.
What are you doing? Like normally I'd be in bed, like, clocked out to the world, just I'm done. And so I'm like, oh, I've been going and hanging out for 5 minutes with our kids, each of them. And he was blown away. He's like, what? That's awesome. Like, that's amazing.
Oh,
What?
yeah.
Because we had talked about some of the things conversations that I had with the kids and stuff, but I didn't tell him like during the 5 minute time in, we had this conversation. I just said, oh, I was talking with, our daughter or our son,
Yeah.
and this is what came up. Anyway, so yeah, he just was so encouraging, and he saw like changes. I think looking back, and I describe this in the book, so people who read the book can have more of a sense of how this happened. But he saw the direct, like the subtle and the not subtle changes in me, like they were tangible for me. And it even made him, my husband, make changes himself. Like, I think it was maybe about a week and a half or 2 weeks into time in, and he was like, you know what, I am going to set a new goal, and that is when I get home from work, I will put my phone on my nightstand and I won't look at it until after kids are in bed. Like, I'm just finding myself just scrolling, doing that phone zone out thing
Yeah.
during this important family time. So he's like, I'm done with it. I'm not doing that. And so I'm like, sweet, I'll do that too. And that was totally something that I think maybe he felt a change in our home, like, and in my engagement with the children, and in my enthusiasm to like hang with them and play card games with them, or whatever, read a book with them, whatever it was. So that changed. It really did. It changed our whole family. Like one night, I couldn't believe it. My husband, like, he is, I don't know how other husbands are. It's probably different for everyone, but my husband will play like family board games, but he's not like, woo, I love a family game
Yeah.
night.
Yeah.
I don't know. He will tolerate them, but they're not his favorite thing. But one night he's like, let's pop some popcorn, we'll play a game, and just out of the blue. And I'm like, what?
Who are you? Yeah.
I know. So it was so cool to see. And that was stuff that, like, I wasn't nagging about. I wasn't even trying to bring about any of those changes. I was solely focused on these 5 minutes with my children. But the effect, like the ripple effect, was impressive to me, and it was totally unexpected and super amazing for our family. So
That's awesome. Do you feel like when you started doing it, you could slowly like feel the black cloud like lift off of you mentally, to where like as the weeks went by, you just kind of became a new person? Or
well, I don't know. I don't know about new person. I will say, I mean, I don't know that I even necessarily at the time recognized the blackness of my cloud. It was just how I was. But as time went on, I would find myself, my son shared a story when I was talking with him one time about how a kid in his class broke his pencil in math. And so this kid was so sad. It was his favorite green pencil. And so my son came home and he looked through his like collection of pencils that he had accumulated over the elementary school.
Yeah.
We all know what those are, right? There's like
Yeah.
a million pencils. So, and he found a green one and he took it to school and he gave it to this friend, and
Aw.
like, so sweet. Like, this totally randomly came up during time in. I never would have heard this story before. So shoot, I forgot where I was going with this story. Oh, so I found so knowing that about my son, I found myself like randomly, like 3 or 4 days later after I had heard that story,
Uh-huh.
I was in the kitchen and I was doing some dinner prep or something while kids were at school. And I found myself being like, oh, I wonder if that pencil's still working out for that kid. And, like I wonder,
Mm.
I found myself as I got to know my kids more and
Mm-hmm.
talk with them, like I would think about them more, and they would, like, even when we weren't together, there was still like a connection there because I would
Mm-hmm.
be considering them. And so that happened more and more. My empathy increased because I could like get their perspective, like it made sense to me because I kind of knew what was going on in their lives now. And I could see like if one daughter came home super sad, but she would swear that nothing was wrong, and I could connect some dots and
Yeah.
be like, I wonder if it's this. And so I think as empathy increases, as connection increases, like there is definitely more light, like just lightness, as in things are not so heavy and things are also not so dark. Lightness
Yeah.
in ways. So yes, definitely the black cloud dissipated, but I didn't it wasn't with the intention of like, let's get this black cloud out of here. It was so gradual and so subtle
Yeah.
that, and it wasn't until looking back I'd be like, oh yeah, like that, I'm different now. I
Mm-hmm.
would not handle this the same 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. I think that's hard for us when we're in the thick of it, especially because it does feel like everybody wants something from you, and it's hard to look at it like it's a two-way, like our children have this two-way street relationship with us, like where, they can share things with us and we have that connection
Yeah.
because when we're in it and it's chaotic and we're going and, we're leaking all over the place and like,
Yeah.
from who knows where, like
I know.
we just feel like it's give, give, give and everybody's taking and you just are left like in this depleted feeling like it's not. Yeah, I don't know how to explain it, but I could totally see how in the mess we would and also feel ashamed that we feel that way and feel like nobody else
Yeah.
feels that way.
And super isolated and
Yeah.
lonely. That, yeah.
Hmm.
Yep. That's for sure. So one thing, like in the book, a lot of times I will hear someone's story and be like, okay, that's an interesting story. What's in it for me, kind of, or whatever. And
Right.
while this book, like, it does graphically detail my own experience with this, I really wanted it to be helpful for other moms, like, for whatever reason, going through something similar, some sort of disengagement, however that looks, or
Yeah.
even just, busyness in life. And so, like, in the book, there's like insights about like why maybe disengagement happens and what it might look like.
Mm.
It takes you through like each night for the first 2 weeks, like each conversation, just kind of a synopsis of it, and then takeaways, like what I learned from that and how that um, affects moving forward. There's conversation
Yeah.
prompts because
Ooh.
after like a week, I'm like, okay, this is
What?
going to
Yeah.
really fast, like if we don't. So anyway, so there's conversation prompts and kind of the reasoning behind those. There are different in the book. There's some modifications because not every family, as I've said, like, and not every family looks the same, and different parents work and schedules. Maybe each week you have a different schedule, and so you have to like modify time in
Mm-hmm.
so that it works, for you and for your kids, because
Right.
everyone can do 5 minutes at bedtime. Sometimes, that's just not feasible. And so there are modification suggestions in the book also. And then there's a whole chapter dedicated to um, ideas for how to stay connected to kids of all ages, of all family sizes. These are ideas that I had, but also like from my tribe, like from
Mm.
people around and people I know and people I actually don't even know that well, but some of them, like, they have grown kids and grandkids and teenagers and babies and just the whole spectrum of family life,
Mm-hmm.
and how you can actually like stay connected. Like, I don't do my 5 minute time in at bedtime anymore, like necessarily on that formal schedule like I
Mm-hmm.
did to kickstart. And I don't know that it's necessary. I check in with my kids, and we have like a bedtime routine and stuff, but it's not the same. And so there's a whole chapter that talks about that and gives like 75 or 80, I don't remember how many ideas of like really tried and true ways to be connected and stay connected and maintain a relationship throughout like adulthood with your kids, which that's ultimately the goal, at least for me. And I would think
Yeah.
parents, it's not, it's easy to have tunnel vision of like, oh, young kids, like how do I help them through this, sixth
Mm-hmm.
grade year? This is a tough one, versus like when they're 36, and
Right.
they still need a parent
Yeah.
and that connection there.
Yeah,
Anyways,
that's
so the
that's one
book,
of that's one of our goals as parents.
yeah,
My husband and I always talk about that. Is like when we watch a show, I'm like, man, like we're not going to be like that. I want our daughter to be able to come tell us those things, or like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And that's so important. I love hearing that from you, especially, and other moms, like to get clear on what your hopes are
mm-hmm.
for your relationship. Because for me, my turning point was like an obvious, like, it was a complete like epiphany in my heart and in my brain,
Right,
and so for me that switch was an easy flip. But for someone maybe listening, or someone else is like, well, I mean, I'm doing okay. I don't have a black cloud. I'm all right. My kids are okay. Like, how is this helpful to me?
mm,
I think anytime that you can pause your life, like you said, put a pause, spend those minutes, snuggling with your daughter, or talking with them about whatever it is that they need to or want to talk about. Like anytime you can put your life on pause momentarily and connect with them, that's going to set you up
mm,
for a lifetime, I think.
yeah. Man, I love this. I'm super excited to check out your book now. If for everybody listening, you can get it on Amazon. Like, I mean, we all know how to navigate Amazon like the
Yeah.
back of our hand. So,
Yeah.
but make sure you check it out. It's the 5 minute time in by, and you just have to look up Brittney Smart. But yeah, I love that because it doesn't even necessarily have to be like a how to book, but I love how you're just genuinely sharing your journey. And I feel like when like before we did this interview, how I was mentioning, I like conversations to be just like, if we were moms sitting on the couch talking about real life. I feel like
Yeah.
those are the things that we learn most from versus being like talked at of like,
Yeah.
and so I feel like that is awesome that you're just openly sharing, something so vulnerable, and then you're like just the whole experience to where a mom could read it, and even though it won't be their exact journey, they can visualize what their journey would look like when they were to do something similar, or
Yeah.
and so that's pretty cool. I love
Yeah.
that.
Thank you. That was my hope. And there was, I had one response. Well, I've had a lot of response from this book, but the one that might be the most meaningful to me was from a woman who I overheard her describing my book to someone else, and she said, I feel like I hesitate to read parenting books because a lot of times I walk away from them, feeling like, oh, I suck. Like I
Yeah.
should be doing way more. And she's like, the thing about this book is that I feel like this is a friend talking to me who really wants me
Mm,
to succeed.
yeah.
And I felt that reading, and that's exactly, there is no judgment. There is no like, I don't know what I'm trying to say. There's no judgment. It's acceptance, and it's a hopeful solution,
Yeah.
to someone who might need it. And frankly, I think in today's like busy world, not to sound like granulicious, but I like we all need to pause and be present with our children. And this is just one applicable way that can happen.
Yeah. No,
So,
I totally get that even from just talking to you, that this was more about you genuinely wanting to share your journey in hopes that another mom doesn't have to feel that same shame or guilt or loneliness in a similar, or even in just mom life in general.
Yeah.
And
Right.
with not really any expectation, but to just like, unite in
Sure.
motherhood, basically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I love that. Before we end this conversation, I just wanted to ask you if there's any advice or like one thing that you would want to wish for moms that are listening, or like one last thing to say. It doesn't have to be deep or anything like that, but I just want to give you the opportunity to kind of just give us like one little last tidbit, if you will.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So many things.
Yeah.
I guess, I guess the main things that I would want people to maybe take away from me or from this book or even this conversation, um, two things. Let's just say the first, it's totally possible to make a big difference in a relationship, no matter where your starting point is. Like today, it, without spending hours and hours and hours, and I'm not saying it's not important to spend time with our families, but like when you're intentional, it's totally possible to do that in small bits, like quality over quantity when it comes to time.
Yeah.
And sometimes it may not feel possible, but it is actually.
Yeah.
I mean, minutes is not a big deal. And secondly, it's also possible to reverse feelings of disengagement or dissatisfaction or even unhappiness, in your family life. And the way that you can do that is to spend a little time and really try to foster love, like somewhat,
Yeah.
getting to them. So yeah, those two things, like you can make a big difference in a little amount of time when you're intentional with that time. And there is hope. Like it's possible, and it may not feel like it in the moment, like, but it is. You
Yeah.
can.
Okay, so you guys have to go check out Brittney's book. It's on Amazon, The 5 Minute Time In. Brittney, is there anywhere else that moms can connect with you? Or I know you have a few other books that I was checking out on Kindle, on Amazon as well, but is there anywhere else that we can find you?
Um, I yes, I have a website, and it is. I'm running for the worst possible website in all of the land
That
because
is
I
not
have
true.
zero tech skills. But it is, if you want to check out the worst website, and it still is a very baby in its infantile state, it's just Brittney Smart, Brittney, smart.me.
Okay, and it is still so good. You're even with, I think you have like 2 or 3 blog posts on there, and even those were really great, and you like just brutal honesty like out the door, and I love that. So
Love
give
it.
yourself a little credit. Thank you, Brittney, so much for being on the podcast. I'm really glad we got to talk about this.
Thank you, Ashley. I've loved chatting with you.
Hey guys, I hope this episode was helpful for you. I know it was for me because as a new mom of now 3 kiddos, it's hard for me to still take time for each child individually. And I know how important that is, but logistically, like it just doesn't happen and I can't plan it. And so I love that Brittney shared her story and how like it goes and how like the routine that she created to accomplish that. And I think that that's something that's really easy for us to accomplish and copy. So thanks, Brittney, for sharing that. And I hope you guys go check out her book. Just sharing our journeys together as moms and women in general is so helpful. And even if we don't have the exact same issue or experiences, like there are similarities in all of our lives that help us navigate motherhood or just life in general a little bit easier. So I hope you guys continue to listen in. I hope that you got something helpful from this. I hope you share it with another friend who could gain some knowledge or maybe some insight from it as well. And I hope you guys have an awesome week.